Welcome to the workshop about how to build a sustainable indie studio and actually become independent. I'm going to introduce myself first. I'm Norman. I've been more than 10 years in the software and game development industry. I'm the co-creator and producer of the game Duck Paradox that was nominated for Best Game Latin America at Gamescom Latin America 2025. And I'm the author of the book Scrum for Indie Game Development. With that said, let's start the workshop. I'm going to start talking about a very harsh reality, and that is that most indie studios never finish their first game, and those that manage to finish it, most of them never release a second one. There's a ton of competition. More than 20,000 games are released every year, and most of them make little money regardless of their quality. The tragedy here is not the failure, but that they don't get a second attempt. You see, it's actually very common in basically every industry that about 20% of the players of the industry take 80% of the earnings. This happens in game development, but it also happens in YouTube. 20% of the videos get 80% of the views. Or even in the universe, 20% of the stars have 80% of the mass. So we shouldn't be focusing on trying to be only on this 20%. We should be focusing on, regardless of the specific outcome of what percentage of the full market we're getting, that we can still have a sustainable studio and survive. So that shouldn't be our worry. What actually makes studios disappear? Well, it's definitely not talent, but probably strategy. Because most indie studios don't think about building a system, just think about their game. They think about building this masterpiece of a game that's going to solve all their problems and make everyone happy. And every little thing they do new for the game, they think, oh wow, I need to now add this and that so it's even better. And they don't design for a compounding sustainability. When I talk about compounding, I mean you have a code that can be reused. You have a community that every time grows more with each game, experience and different things. Things that every time you make one, it helps you and gives you leverage for the next one. And besides that, they have a weak production and release plan. They don't follow a plan that gives them more probabilities of having success. There's no specific production methodology, and there's a bad alignment with their team and their own ideas. And if you're a solo developer and you don't think you need a team, you still need to be able to align your ideas you have at the moment with what you're actually doing in the game. And this as a consequence makes the games take 3 to 5 years to be developed. The scope keeps growing uncontrollably, and because it grows so much, the return on their time and investment is not enough. So they end up burning all their resources and having a burnout. So now that we know that those are mostly the problems that make indie studios fail, let's reflect a little bit about that. If you're making your own project right now, how long has your game been in development? And did you think it's going to realistically ship at the time that you thought? And also, what happens if it slips for another year? Let's think about it for about 2 minutes. Okay, now, having all of this in mind, let's now jump to a very important shift in the mindset to be able to be sustainable. And that is, instead of thinking about a masterpiece, let's think about a master plan. What would happen if you think a little bit different about that? If you think about a master plan that can make you sustainable, you would start thinking about a smaller scope, clear finish lines, reusable systems of, as I said, code, experience, knowledge, and community. And very important, a fast shipping mindset. If you keep all those things in mind, it doesn't matter if your game is being the best or it's under that 20%. At the end, your studio will have more possibilities of being sustainable, and sustainability beats perfection. So, I'm not saying all of this out of nowhere. I'm saying it because there's many other studios that actually apply this kind of mindset, and they're very successful. For example, Strange Scaffold Games. Their CEO is always talking about how important it is to have a sustainable studio where even the games that make pizza money can be celebrated. And you have people like Adam Saltzman. He sometimes works with Finji. He made 13 games in 2025. His philosophy is to prototype as quick as possible, find the fun or what makes the game interesting, and then go directly to production because you already have a validation that the game works and that it should already exist. And then you have another kind of studio with another strategy, would say, that's Suck Pop. Suck Pop has a model, a subscription model, where people pay about $4 a month and they get all their games. And they release games even every 3 weeks because they're a group of different developers, each one of them working on their own games and not worrying too much about perfection, but of shipping games that people can enjoy and have fun every time. And if one of those games ends up being better than all the others that people are playing it the most, then they polish it a little more and also release it on Steam. That way they keep being sustainable and keep making as many games as they want. And then you have studios like Landfall. They release a game every year. Or at least they did that in the beginning. But now that they're sustainable because they have so many games that are popular, they allow themselves to take a little longer. It took a little longer to release their game Haste. And now this year, they didn't release a game. They just showed some of the new content for their other games. They're probably cooking something bigger because now they can allow themselves to do that because they're already sustainable. Now, all of these studios have different styles, different genres, with the same principle. Ship often. The benefits? Well, you learn faster. It's a way lower financial risk. You grow your audience gradually, using it every game, having more and more. And you can reuse the systems and the knowledge that you build on each one. That helps you have the next one with more ease. In the end, all of this just iterates, and iteration compounds. Waiting doesn't. So, knowing this mindset, now we also need to have some kind of development structure that can give us the most amount of possibilities of succeeding. I broke down what most of the successful indie studios do in 4 different stages of the development of a game. Now, if your game is in one of these stages and you feel like in the previous stage you missed something or you did something wrong, don't think about having to go back. Just focus on the stage you are right now in and continue through that stage until you manage to release your game. That's the most important thing, not going back. With that said, let's start talking about them. So the first one will be prototype and validate. Here is where you're going to do a quick, dirty prototype. You're not going to think about fancy programming, code, fancy art style, nothing like that. You just have to prove the experience of the game. You have to prove that it's fun or interesting or both. And of course, when I say prove, I'm not talking about your mom saying that it's a cool game. You need to try more than that. Maybe invite some friends on the weekend, cook something for them, or tell them, let's play some video games, and then you put your game as well for them to try it out. And you see what they're doing. You check and understand if they're really having fun or if they're just, finding it cool because you're a friend and that's it. Then maybe you can also go to some events. I live in Hamburg, for example, and here there's events every about a month where indie developers can bring their games and people can try them out. If you happen to have something like that, or you can organize your own, just letting people come in and check your game and you can take notes, that's the best way of proving your prototype as quick as possible. And then once you know the game is good enough, once you can say, this is something I can see people playing, then you commit to make a vertical slice. Now, a vertical slice is not a normal demo. It has to be a version of the game that is stable and reusable. What I mean with this is the code needs to be reusable, the art, everything that you're using there. And it has to be kind of already what the full game is going to be, but in a smaller version. Why? Because this is the time where you're going to show it to the world. You're going to make a store page. You're going to make the best cover art you can. And you're going to show the game to the players. And then, with all the feedback and everything you gather, you're going to use that to make the rest of the game. But to be able to do this, and to be able to keep the standards up of the promise you're making of how the game is going to look, that version of the game that everyone is trying and that they already know how it is, has to be how the game is going to look and how it's going to feel. It's not like you're going to make a demo that looks some way and you promise things that are not there, and then you can't deliver because the things that you promise, nobody even know how they were going to work, not even yourself, because you didn't make them before. It has to be in a way so everything you did can be reused to make the rest of the game. It also makes it way easier and faster. Trust me on that. And for this, you already need to have a production system. Not before in the prototyping phase, but now. You need a system where you can predict the work you're doing. You can communicate well with your team or your stakeholders, or even understand yourself when you're doing things. So you can know when you're going to finish each step. And then, once that's done, once you have some proof, you gather all the feedback, you take all that, you know exactly what the game needs to be now and how it has to be finished, and you go for the full production of the game. This step is the best step, by the way, to try to get some funding, because now you got some proof that the game is cool, people are playing it, you got the feedback to know what needs to be changed, if there's anything to be changed, so it's completely well done, and you have some followers, some players, some community. So you can use that as a leverage for finding an investor or crowdfunding or something like this. And it's also the moment where you polish your game and you make a release plan that is as predictable as possible with your production system. And then after that, you finally go for the release. You make a final marketing push and you collect every learning that you get from what you did through this game. And with those learnings, you start planning your next game. Because this is not your masterpiece. It's just part of your master plan. It's a game that you enjoyed making, you learn a lot from it, and you have to go to make the next one. So you can start building that studio that is sustainable. Now that we know all of this, let's reflect a little bit on that. Do you think your decisions are matching the stage you are in right now? Or what adjustments do you think you need to make? Or if you don't have any of these stages in that way, what would it look like if you actually follow these stages working on your game. Just think about it about for 1 or 2 minutes. Now, before closing, just want you to remember that even with this full development structure, the most important thing is to have that production system working fine. Otherwise, you're going to lose yourself in development. Your scope is still going to be growing. Everything's going to go sideways. You're not going to be able to predict anything. And that's when your game takes longer than you want and you start leaking all your resources. But once you have that in check, you have the best amount of possibilities of having a game that is successful and a studio that is sustainable. So remember, independence is engineered. You just have to stay in the game long enough to win. Because talent starts games, but structure finishes them. Thank you for listening to this workshop and participating. Now we have some time for questions.